Hi there, Writers Workout Conference. I'm Julian Winters, award winning author of multiple published novels, mainly in the young adult category, and I'm super beyond incredibly excited to talk to you all today about the path to publishing. Specifically, my path to publishing, which didn't quite look like what I thought it was going to. It didn't look like what I saw on TV. I wasn't this writer sitting at his laptop, typing away, crafting my ultimate manuscript, submitting it to a literary agent, and then going on to take over the world. I was not Carrie Bradshaw. But that's okay. That's the amazing thing about publishing is that no journey is going to look like anyone else's. It is not a one size fits all industry. We all have our own paths. We all have our own destinations, and we're not all going to get there at the same time or in the same way. But that's the beautiful part. And I want you to embrace that. And I hope through this talk, and I hope at the end of this talk, that you understand that you are on your own journey and it is going to be magical. So, before I get too far into this, let me start from the very beginning. How did I go from being this nerdy comic book geek sitting in the corner of his room reading X-Men to having 5 published novels and even more to come? Well, let me tell you something. I was not always an avid reader, nor was I someone who actually really enjoyed writing. And that's because, specifically in high school, the books that I was assigned to read, anytime they featured a character that looked like me, that identified like me, that had the same dreams and hopes, that just wanted to fall in love, or just wanted that happy ending, their story did not go that way. More often than not, the stories that feature characters that look like me or identified like me had stories of trauma, sadness, and death. And that was not very encouraging to me as a young reader. I didn't enjoy picking up books knowing that when I hit the end, I wasn't going to be there. I wasn't the one who got to wield the magic. I wasn't the hero. I didn't get to fall in love and have my first kiss. I usually didn't even make it through halfway through the book. So it took me a while to really get into reading and really get into writing because I just felt like I had no power. I didn't belong on the shelves, and nothing made me want to pick up a book and be there until I started to realize I had the power to write my own stories, to tell different kinds of stories that feature people like me, who identified like me, who get to have their happy ending, who get to slay the dragon, who get to possess magic, who get to fall in love and fall on their face on the way. People who get to just live ordinary lives who look like me. And that was so powerful. That's what made me want to keep going. That's made me sit down with my notebook, my little 5-star notebook, my little big pen, and start to really craft out the stories I wanted to tell. To really reach those readers who were just like me, who were tired of not getting to the end in a book. So that's what I started doing. I started writing all kinds of short stories and poems and really bad songs. And I started to really hone in on the kinds of things that I wanted to see for people like me in books. From there, I actually sat down and started writing fan fiction. Yep. What? Yes, you heard me correctly. Fan fiction. And no, I will not be sharing my fandoms or my AO3 account with you. Please don't ask. But yeah, I fell into fan fiction and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with what it was like to sit in someone else's sandbox and take their characters and write the kind of stories that I wanted to write and use their sand to build the castles I wanted, to build the worlds that I wanted, the universes that I wanted, and to really fall in love with what it meant to be the hero in a story, what it meant to tell the kind of stories that I wanted readers to fall in love with also. So I spent quite a few years in fan fiction, which is where I first started developing my own writing community. I started building connections with people, favorite writers and favorite readers and sending messages and just really starting to feel like I had a place. I had a place in the writing world and I had a place in my own universe. I got to exist, and people were happy that I existed. So I spent a lot of time in fan fiction, and through fan fiction, actually, is where I met my first published author. I didn't meet my first published author at a school visit or at a local bookstore or on a book tour. I met my first published author through fan fiction, through fandom, um, through the community that I built, through my prolific writing. I don't want to count how many stories I wrote, but it's somewhere in the hundreds. But by doing that, I built this kind of notoriety where everyone wanted to know me and everyone wanted to read my stuff. And that's how I met an amazing author who actually just messaged me on Tumblr. Yes, the good old days of Tumblr. She messaged me and she said, "I love your stories. I love what you do with your characters. I love falling in love with each time that you write something new. Would you ever consider writing a novel?" And I was blown away. One, because it's always amazing when someone comes to you and says they love what you write, but also because someone actually said, "This is something you can do. You can become a writer. You can become a published writer. You can have your books on shelves." And that's not something I ever imagined, especially as a teen in high school, reading the books that I read and saying, no one ever wants to hear anything from someone like me. So that amazing author, after I kind of, I don't want to say avoided it, but I did avoid her for a little bit because I was like, this is not real. This is fake. I can't believe it. After she reached out repeatedly, and actually, showed me that, yes, I'm a real author, I decided to sit down and say, you know what? Just like with writing my first story and writing my first fanfic and publishing and putting it on the internet, why not? Why not believe in myself? If no one else is going to do it, why not take that chance on a dream? And so I did. I sat down and I started writing my first novel, Running with Lions, with every intent of by the time I hit the end, it is going to be a complete trash fire. No one's going to read this. I'm never going to be published. But I did finish, and I revised, and I revised some more. And I sent it out to peers that I had met through my fanfic community, and I had them read it, and then I revised some more. And I really started to hone in on what the story was. And suddenly I was like, wow, am I really going to do this? Am I really going to try to be Carrie Bradshaw? Spoiler alert, I didn't try to be Carrie Bradshaw. I could never have that kind of amazing collection of clothes and shoes. But I did start to begin my path towards becoming a publishing author. So while I was writing Rolling Lions and I was really putting in all this hard work into revising it, I started to look at bookshelves. I started to go into bookstores and look at what books are being featured and what's out there right now. Because it's an important part of your publishing journey is understanding what is already out on the shelves, what is coming to the shelves, what has already been done, and how do you fit into that. So I started looking at bookshelves and trying to find novels that would kind of be a great comp to Running with Lions. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find that many novels that really felt like the kind of story I was trying to tell, which is, oh my gosh, yay, you're writing this original thing. But also, is that a sign that publishing doesn't want what I'm trying to write? So while doing that, and this was around 2014, 2015, so things like We Need Diverse Books and other organizations that really have pushed for diversity, really have pushed to allow stories to be told from more than just one particular group of people, we're still in their growing stages. And so I thought to myself, well, if publishing has already put this out and they've already said this is the only kind of stories that they want, and that's not the story I'm trying to tell, how do I get into publishing? How do I get my novel out there for the readers that I wrote it for? So I began to do my research on publishing. And there's multiple ways for you to get into publishing that I'm not going to get really deep into. There's self-publishing, which after a ton of research and a lot of suggestions from other writers and whatnot, I said that's probably not the path for me. My marketing skills are not that great, and the dedication that has to be put into that and the knowledge and whatnot I didn't have at the time. So I X'd out self-publishing and I X'd out hybrid publishing because that's another form of self-publishing. And then I start to look at what are my other options. Could I get a literary agent and get my story out that way? I could, It may take longer. They may not want it, or someone might be scared to take on my story because it's not out there right now. Or I could go on another route. And that's what I did. I started picking up other books and reading and really consuming and finding the stuff that I loved. And I stumbled upon this one book called Into the Blue. And it was just amazing. I fell in love with the story and the characters and the romance. And I was like, this is what I want. And so I flipped to the back of the book and saw who the publisher was. And I made note of it. And then I picked up another book. And that book was amazing. It was by a totally different author, but it still had an amazing story and characters. And I remember crying and I was like, this is incredible. Let me make a note of who this publisher is too. And it was the same publisher. And I started to see a pattern of what this publisher was putting out. Amazing stories, incredible romances, profound characters, and something that is always going to leave me at the end wanting more. So I found out who that publisher was, and it was a publisher by the name of Interlude Press, who was a small independent publisher, strictly focused on queer-centered stories that had a happily ever after. Every book they published would never end in death. It would never end in sadness. It would never end in trauma. The ending always had to be happy. That was the stipulation that they put out for anyone trying to submit to them. And I knew that's where I wanted to go. I knew that was the path I wanted. I wanted to reach the readers like me, no matter how small, and let them know that we have stories to be told where we get to have these happily ever afters, where we get to be the main character, we get to be the hero. So through my research of Interlude Press, I found out that they had an open submission. And I read all the guidelines and made sure that I revised and revised and revised again, running with Lions, until it met until I hit every checkbox and knew, okay, I'm ready now. And even then, it was still a mess, as all good drafts are. It was still not perfect, but it told a story that I wanted to tell, that felt original, that I felt readers really needed. And so I submitted to Interlude Press and did what all good writers did, panicked, and waited for a couple of months before they reached back out to me and said, oh my goodness, we have been searching for a young adult novel like this. Would you please consider sitting down with us and having a conversation about what you want your publishing path to look like and whether or not we're a good fit? And I did. I had a wonderful, amazing conversation with their small staff. They only had a staff of 3, which was the editor, the marketing manager, and the cover designer, who was also in charge of all like social media and other things like that. And so I sat down with them, had this incredible conversation, and left feeling like even if I don't get chosen by them, even if they decide to pass on my book, this was an incredible way for me to get on my journey, to get going, to take a chance myself and see that, yes, you can do it. And so after that, they did want Run with Lions. They signed me for that book. And before even Running with Lions came out, they signed me for my second book, Happy Remy Camry. And then after that, they signed me for my third book, The Summer of Everything. And it was just this amazing opportunity for me to not only go on my own path in publishing, but to kind of see that it doesn't have to look like what I thought it was going to. It doesn't have to be a certain way. Through Interlude Press, which again, small publisher, most times when you think about publishing, you think you get the literary agent, you go to this big 5 publisher, they do these amazing things, they throw all this money at you to make sure that you're successful, and that's that. And I went a different path. I went to a small independent publisher where I didn't get an advance for any of my books. They didn't have the reach that the big 5 publisher had. They didn't have the budget that the big 5 publisher have. But they had the determination, they had the will, and they had an incredible staff of people who were 1000% behind me. And through that independent publisher, my first book actually won an award. It won the IBPA, Benjamin Franklin Award for Best Teen Fiction that year. So that was all the independent publishers that submitted a YA book to them. Running with Lions was their top pick. So I won an award for that. Following that, my second book, How to Be Remy Cameron, my third book, The Summer of Everything, were both school and library journal gold selections, which means that when School Library Journal picks your book for that, they buy out a whole bunch of books from your publisher and with the intent of getting them into more schools, getting them into more libraries who are enrolled in that program. So not only through the small publisher did I win an award, but all of a sudden now my books were being fed to schools and libraries, and they were on actual brick and mortar bookshelves, not just online. I could walk into a Barnes and Noble, I could walk into my local independent bookstore and see my book on the shelf. Um, so that was an incredible thing about the small publisher was, even though it might seem like their reach was very limited, it wasn't. They were able to get through to so many people and get my name out there and get me onto book panels and to book festivals and different book events that helped me grow my own writing community. It is through things like Running with Lions and my other books with Interlude Press that I was able to meet best-selling authors and award-winning authors and really build my book community, my author community, and make those connections and really hone in on what it was that I wanted, which is to reach those readers who needed my story, to get through to those young readers who were tired of not seeing themselves in books, not being able to feel like they were the hero. So I spent again three books with Interlude Press and really started to learn different things because their staff was so small. I had to do a lot of things on my own. I had to learn what it meant to be my own promoter, to reach out to different libraries, to reach out to booksellers, to reach out to different communities, so I could kind of like build out who I am, who is Julian Winters to this young adult community, and that was super important to me, especially on my next step in my writing journey, which is after my third book, I had become fairly well known. I was doing really well, making appearances and whatnot, but there were things about publishing I still didn't understand, still didn't know, and things about publishing that my small independent publisher were not able to have access to or to help me get to that next step. And so I decided, all right, it's time. I'm going to get a literary agent. The amazing thing is, my literary agent actually met me before my first novel came out. She had heard about it, she had heard the buzz about it, and she approached me at a festival and she said, whenever you're looking for a literary agent, whenever you're ready to take that next step, I would love for you to query me. And it took 3 books, it did. But I finally sat down and said, okay, this is where I want my journey to go to next. Who can help me with it? And my agent, I reached out to her. I had started writing my fourth novel. I sent her a query letter and a sample of my writing and whatnot, and said, I would love it if you would represent me. I would love if we together could go on this next step in my writing journey. She immediately responded and we had a meeting, and she chose me. She said, I would love to represent you. I would love to be your agent. I would love to build out the Julian Winters brand. And that's how I got to the next step of publishing, which is having a literary agent. And from that literary agent, I got my fourth book and my fifth book and my sixth book actually signed with a big five publisher. I was signed to Penguin Random House after spending months and months and months working on that fourth book manuscript and really honing it in and working with a literary agent, which was different because with my first 3 novels, I would write my book and it would just be me and the editor. But now I had a literary agent, another set of eyes to help me really zone in and craft out the right kind of story that would attract even more readers. And then we signed with Penguin Random House, and I got to that next step, which is having a big publisher who is behind me, who has more resources, who has more money, who has more ability to get me to different places and meeting with different people and going to different events and whatnot, and going on my first book tour and all these other things were through taking that next step and knowing that it was time for me to take that next step. And I think that's a very important part that you should really focus on is knowing when it is time for you to go ahead and make that next move. Sometimes we feel like we have to jump the gun and go right in, and this is what I need to do right now because this is what this person over here has done, and I've seen this author over here do that. And that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes you have to take a step back and say, where do I need to be versus where do I want to be in my publishing journey? And let me just backtrack for a second and say that while I was very fortunate that I had met my literary agent before my first book came out, and our connection was immediate, it was charged, it was wonderful. That's not always how you get a literary agent. There are other ways. I won't go into too much detail, but there's pitch contests that you can do. There is what I think is probably the most organic and most helpful method, which is just cold querying an agent. If you go to their page and they have open submissions, just query them. Query them with, what your intent is, what your book is, what it's about, who you are as an author, and that finished manuscript. Yes, we are back to that point. Please know that you can't submit to an agent, to a publisher, to anyone to start your writing journey without having a fully complete manuscript because they don't know what story you're trying to tell. They don't know who you are, no matter how wonderful you write up a synopsis or write up what your story is or what ideas you have. You have to have something completed. They have to know that you can finish the book. So please, once we finish this talk, finish that book. From going to having a contract with Penguin Random House, I had my fourth and fifth book came out, and my literary agent and I sat down and we said, okay, let's look at what are your next steps on your writing journey. And it was so wonderful to have someone else beside me to say, this is what I want for you. And I had done other things along the way besides publishing my own standalone books. I had written anthologies. I had done all these different things. And she said, it's finally time for us to take that next step. And we decided that I was going to write my first adult novel. And I did. I sat down and we worked together for over a year. Over a year, even though I've had many books out before, it still took a year for us to craft out the right kind of first adult novel because every step on your writing journey is a start over. And that's a good thing. That's an amazing thing. It's a chance for you to really remember why you're in this and why you love this so much. We crafted out my first novel and I sold it to Macmillan, and it's going to be coming out later on. But that's the thing, though. I took another step on the writing journey that I didn't think I would ever do in the very beginning when I was just that comic book geek who hated writing, who hated reading, who wanted nothing to do with novels. All of a sudden now I have multiple books published. I have awards. I have starred reviews. I'm taking the next step into another age category. And it's not like any of my colleagues. I know writers who have gone straight from writing their first book to getting a literary agent to becoming a New York Times bestseller. I know other authors who are on their 20th manuscript who have a literary agent but have not published a book yet. And I know others who are still lingering in that fan fiction world, just writing the stories that they love. That is okay. Whatever step you're on, whatever part of the process that you're in, wherever you are in this maze of publishing, it's all right to be where you are and not be like anyone else's. Don't be like anybody else. Be original. Be yourself. Love who you are and the journey that you're taking through publishing. I want to give you a couple of exercises, things that I want you to focus in on, things I want you to hone in on while you're finishing that book that I know you will finish. I want to give you a couple of things that you can do in the meantime to kind of gear yourself up for that next step in your publishing journey. First things first, I want you to find 5 books that you absolutely love. They can be on your bookshelf, they can be in your Kindle, they can be on your phone, they can be on your audiobook, wherever it is. I want you to find 5 books that you absolutely love. First thing I want you to do is either, if you have a physical copy of the book, look on the spine of the book. If you have a digital copy or an audio copy or something like that, I want you to flip or go to the first couple of pages and find out who that publisher is. Make note of that publisher. See if that publisher has put out other things that you truly love, things that you just could not put down, books that you were just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Make note of that as well. I want you to then go to their catalog online and see what else they have. Where does your book fit into that publisher? Make note of it. This is just you making a dream list of who are the publishers you would love to work with one day. Because when you get to this next step, that's important to know what you want for yourself in your career. After you've done that, I want you to then skip to the book's acknowledgments. Now, if you have it on audiobook, that might be a little bit harder. But if you have a digital copy or a physical copy, skip to the very back of the book to the author acknowledgments. Usually in the beginning, hopefully in the beginning, the author has somehow thanked or credited their agent and their author for finishing that book, for it being what it is today. Make note of A, their agent, and B, the editor. Obviously, you love this book for a reason, and those two people helped to get it to where it is right now, that you to the thing that you fell in love with. So make note of that. Make note of the agent, and then I want you to go to research that agent. Go through their list of clients, see who they're already representing. Where do you fit into that? Are they representing the kind of authors who have careers that you want to somehow mirror? It's never going to look the same. Please understand that. Please note that even though they can have New York Times bestsellers or award-winning authors or people who've had their books turned into movies and TV, that does not mean that that's the path that you're going to have. But I want you to make note of that, because then you know the potential there. You know what they're capable of. You also know that they're working on the kinds of stories that you either fall in love with or the kinds of stories you want your readers to fall in love with. Also, make note of the editor. That's an important process when you do, or if you do, get a literary agent. Once you guys reach that point where the manuscript is as good as it gets, your agent is going to come to you with a list of editors that they're thinking of submitting it to. You having knowledge of who that editor who wrote that book that you just could not get enough of is going to make a difference in you knowing, yes, I want this person on my team. I want them to help me get to the next path on my publishing journey. These are things that I just took note of to understand, to know what I wanted for myself. Again, it's not going to look like anyone else's, and it never has. My publishing path has never looked like any other my other colleagues' path. But it gave me a framework, and it gave me goals for myself to reach. It showed me the potential of where I could be in my own career by having that done that research, by having made those notes, by knowing who and what is happening in publishing. So please make sure you do that. When you're going to look for a literary agent, should you go look for a literary agent, I have one more exercise for you. I want you to go Google this for me. It's called Manuscript Wishlist, and it is a website where usually literary agents, sometimes editors, put on there what is their dream manuscript. What is it going to feature? What is it going to have? What themes is it going to tackle? What is it that they're looking for, and see if your book fits into any of those things. That was one thing that I did before I even reached out to my agent, who already knew me. I went to her manuscript wish list and I saw what kind of books she wanted to have in her collection, what she wanted on her list, and they fit the kind of stories that I wanted to tell. So it was important to me to know that in the long run, the future stories I wanted to tell, or even the stories I was trying to tell at that moment, she wanted those desperately, which meant that the energy and the fire she was going to put behind them was already there. So please try to follow those exercises of making lists and looking and researching and different things when it comes to publishers, agents, editors, and whatnot, so that you can go on your own path, your own journey, and have that little flashlight to kind of help you through the maze. Before I leave you, I do want to talk to you and remind you of a couple of things. First and foremost, always remember why you're writing the stories that you write. Are you like me? Were you that little kid in the corner reading a comic book or reading your favorite novel, or just wishing and hoping that you could find something, any piece of story, any piece of media that featured someone like you to make you feel like you were the hero? Remember that. Remember that passion and that love you have for that story, and what got you to this point that you decided you were going to sit down at a laptop and really go for it. Always remember who you're writing for and who it is that you want to reach with your stories. Also remember, what ways can you build the community surrounding you? Who are you connecting with? Like I said with fandom, I connected with my readers and other writers all the time. So who are you connecting with? What hashtags are you clicking on? What other conferences besides this one are you joining? What other things are you paying attention to? Who are you reaching out to just to kind of build an organic community around you? People who will support you on this journey and on this path. Never forget them. Remember them and be that person for them that you want them to be for you. Remember this, and I know you probably hear it all the time. Publishing is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Take your time, savor the moments, go on the journey, do the research. Research, 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 research. Don't be afraid to ask any question, no matter how silly you think it is, no matter how novice you think it is, no matter how big you think it is. Ask the questions so that you have the knowledge you need in order to take the next step, in order to keep going, in order to inch through that maze till you get to that final goal. Okay? Your path doesn't have to look like anyone else's. It doesn't mean that you're going in the wrong direction. It does not mean you're not going to reach your goal. But you have to know that this journey is your own. It's not any less important or any less impactful to the from that person to your left or to your right or that person already ahead of you. It's your journey and it's super important. You'll get there. Just don't give up on yourself. And when you do get to the end, just know that I'll be waiting there, waving, and congratulating you on what you've accomplished.